With praise, we come today, Lord God, to praise you. So we bring the sacrifice of praise into the house of the Lord on today, Lord God. Thanking you, Heavenly Father, for waking us this morning and giving us another chance, Lord God, to come out into your house of prayer, your house of praise, your house of worship, Lord God. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. We thank you. We come pleading the blood of Jesus today, Lord God, over this ministry today, over everyone, Lord God, that concerns this ministry. We plead the blood of Jesus, Lord God, the blood of Jesus that washes us, Lord God, from inside out, Lord God. We thank you for that blood, Lord God, and we thank you, Lord, that the blood never loses its power, Lord God, that the blood still works, Lord God. We thank you for the blood justifying today, Lord God. We thank you for the blood sanctifying today. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah. If it wasn't for you, Jesus, where would we be? If it wasn't for you, where would we be, Lord God? For there is no other, Lord. There is none like you, Lord God. So we thank you, Lord, today as we come to you, Lord God. Hallelujah. We thank you, Lord God, that we are more than conquerors today through you because you love us, Lord God. We thank you, Lord. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. That great is he that is in us than he that is in the world. We thank you, Lord, that we can do all things through you that strengthens us, Heavenly Father. Hallelujah, Lord God. For you are the one and you're the only one, Lord God. Jesus, you gave your life for us because you care. You didn't have to do it, Lord, but you did it and you did it anyhow, Lord God. So we thank you, Lord, for what you're going to do in this service this morning as we get ready to praise you, Lord God, and to give you the glory, Lord God, and to lift your name up on high, Lord God. We thank you, Lord God. Hallelujah, Lord God. Father, we lift up our loved ones to you in the name of Jesus, Lord. We thank you, Lord God, for touching their hearts, Lord God. Open their spiritual ears that they would hear you, Lord, in the mighty name of Jesus. Hallelujah. We give you the praise, Lord God. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. For you are a mighty God, Lord God. Yes, you are. What a mighty God we serve, Lord. Hallelujah, Lord. You are mighty, Lord, in all your ways. Hallelujah.
So, Lord, God, we give you thanks today. Open up your hearts today. Let's give God some glory. Let's give God the thanks because he is faithful and he is true. God, we just worship you for who you are, oh God. We proclaim that you are El Shaddai, that you are the Almighty God. You are the only God in all creation that can be called Father. You are the only God that can be called friend. We want to open up our arms and lift them up to you, not because I said so, because it is due you, oh God. Our worship and our praise, it is owed to you, God. We know right now, God, without you, we can do nothing today, God. So we just give you honor, God. And we just give you glory, oh God. We ask that you come and visit us in this place, oh God. We know that you cannot dwell among sin, so we ask, oh God, that you send your angels to inspect this place, oh God. That we prepare this place for you, that you can show. And we know when you show up, oh God, that miracles and signs and wonders will happen. But God, most of all, we seek your face and we seek your presence in this place today, God. Yes. And so, God, we just thank you, oh God. We will enter into your gates with thanksgiving today, God. And we will enter into your courts with praise. Your word said to be thankful unto you and to bless your holy name because you are good. So, God, we just thank you for your goodness and your mercy today, God. We thank you that you are good. You are better to us than we are to ourselves, God. You woke us up this morning, oh God, and because your righteousness, oh God, but because of your mercy, oh God, you saw fit that we was able to come again into the house of praise and worship, to worship you and to honor you today, God. So So we call upon you, God. We ask that you send your glory down today, God. We ask that you answer us by fire today, God. We answer that you send your Holy Spirit, the God that works, oh God, the one that is the force of what you are, your creative power, your dunamis power today, God. We call upon you today, God, and we give you honor in the mighty, matchless name of Jesus. Amen. Hallelujah. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the Center of Attraction. My name is Les, and I'll be your pulpit conductor for today. And so we would like to go through our vision and our mission statement. Hallelujah. Our mission is to be the best training and evangelistic ministry in the world. Our mission, Center of Attraction, exists for the purpose of glorifying the name of Jesus through worship, Christian discipline, and the proclaiming of the gospel. What kind of place is it? A progressive and prosperous place, a place of worship to our God, an apostolic and prophetic place, a place of community and international outreach, a place exploding in the world. And what did Jesus say in John 12 and 32? And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. So what do we want to do today? Lift him up, lift him up, lift Jesus up. Hallelujah. You was willing to redeem us from a certain hell. You was willing to redeem us from the hand of the enemy. You purchased us with your precious blood, Jesus. And we give you honor today. Today's scripture is going to come from Psalms 111, verse 1 through 5, and the Bible reads, Praise ye the Lord. I will praise the Lord with my whole heart in the assembly of the upright in the congregation. The works of the Lord are great, sought out of all them that have pleasure therein. His works is honorable and glorious, and his righteousness endureth forever. He hath made his wonderful works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion. He has given meat unto them that fear him. He will ever be mindful of his covenant. So God, we thank you. We thank you for your works today, God. God, they are glorious. We see it all around us. In your word, the Bible says that the earth is full of your glory. My God. And so, God, we just give you the glory because you fill this place with your glory today, God. And so, God, we continue to draw and we'll continue to pull on your glory, oh God. We won't stop until you show
mercy endureth forever. Lord, your love, and your mercy endureth forever.
Father, we thank you today for your goodness and your mercy that endure forever. Let's begin to worship the Lord. Let's begin to tell him how good he is. How good he is to you. Let's take just a moment to do that right now as you reflect on all that he has done. All that he has done.
same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Yeah. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Oh, same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Same God before. It's the same God right now. Unchanging God. Unchanging God. Unchanging God. Unchanging God. Unyielding God. Unyielding God. Unyielding God. Unyielding God. A good, good 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 God.
He's the same God, whatever he did before that we read about, he'll do it again. Somebody say he'll do it again. And he'll do it for me. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 10 and 13, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Say with me, I'm able to bear all things. Escape from everything. Any evil coming up to me and upon me. God is faithful, who will deliver me. Father, we believe in your word and your truth. Right now, God, we stand in full confidence. We stand in faith. We stand in full assurance, knowing that the God of old is the same God today, and the God that will be for our tomorrow. We believe you, God. Say it, I believe God. We believe in you, Father. Say, I believe in you, Father. We believe in your Master. Say, I believe in your Master. We stand in full trust and confidence in you. We believe in you. When others have forsaken you, we believe. When others have denied you, we believe. When others have recanted your name, we believe. We stand in hope. We stand in full trust. And come on, everybody, let's give it to the Lord right now. Whatever the fears, whatever the doubts, whatever the worries, whatever the stresses, we give it up to you today, God. Because you are a God like that. A God that delivers. You are the parasite of our life. And we thank you today, God, that you're delivering us from every evil. And we give you praise for it today. We give you praise for it today. You are a deliverer. Hallelujah.
You are perfect in all of your ways.
Oh, Father.
You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. Perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to
We thank you Miyagi, can you play, please? And it's time for body ministry. And while you're getting up, or ministers, you already know the protocol. That was the word of the Lord that I had when it came to goodness, and I want to continue to expound upon that, because when we think of goodness, we think about the general broadness of the word. But this is what God is saying His goodness is. He said, my goodness is beautiful to you. My goodness is the best. It is better. My goodness is bountiful. My goodness is cheerful. It will put you at ease. My goodness is fair towards you. My goodness is favor. My goodness is fine as gold. My goodness will make you glad. My goodness is kindness, and it is gracious. My goodness is joyful, and it will make you merry. My goodness is pleasant. My goodness is precious. And my goodness is prosperity for your life. The Lord would say that my goodness is sweet, and my goodness is wealth, and my goodness is favor over your life. In Jesus' name. Hallelujah.
Good morning, everyone. As we was worshiping, I'm a little full right now, but as we was worshiping and Miyagi began to play You're Good, and I heard, I'm good like that. Hallelujah! He said, I'm good like that. And as he began to play the second song, it brought back to my remembrance how good he really is. I can remember when I was a kid, and I pray that Apostle and Prophetess do not mind me sharing a part of my life. He's been so good to me. I can't even tell it all. When I was a kid, and I pray this helps somebody today to be able to worship God with your whole heart. When I was a kid, I went through a lot of things with my mother. I was put into foster care. But God always brought it back to my remembrance that He is a good God. And when I hear that second song, that I don't know how you did it, but you did it, God. I share these things with my children, how I went through things in my family. But I don't know how God did it. But He did it for me. He did it for you. When they get up and sing before God, they're singing because God has done something for them. Just like He done something for you and me. So when He says, I don't know how you done it, God, but you did it. I don't know, Lord, but you did it, Lord God. And when I rise up in the morning, I say, thank you, Lord God. Because I think about when I was a kid,
Yes, I am a good, good God. Yes, I am perfect in all my ways. And I'm not just concerned about you coming to be with me forever or to live with Jesus forever, but I'm concerned about your everyday life. I'm concerned about everything that concerns you on this earth. Yes, I am a good, good father. Yes, I am perfect in all my ways.
As the breaker anointing fell upon this place, God says that just trust in me. I have endowed you with supernatural power. Look through my eyes, say God, and there will be no return.
Amen. See, God will say this.
Let me say this, there's a good thing anybody else that wants to testify. Testify. You don't have to be dramatic, but if you want to be dramatic, you can. The Lord wants to hear your testifying, you testifying of Him. He wants to hear that today. So we just give space. I know some of these testimonies today were a little long, so I wanted to shorten it. But the Lord said to me, sitting here, I want to hear them speak. So we allow, normally testimonies are to the point so that we can move forward. But God wants to hear your testimony of Him today. Right? This is the only space of time. So you need to come right now. You need to come right now.
Good morning. This week, I've been sitting at home and I've been praying and I've been thinking and I've been just concentrating on the Lord, and the Lord dropped in my spirit, we are soldiers in the army. We have to fight before we have to cry. We have to hold up the bloodstained banner. We have to hold it up until we die.
The new things that He's going to do, but then He also was saying to me, think back and remember the things that I have done. Basically, it had a lot to do with remembering what He has brought you through, what He has done. Because we do so easily forget. We always look forward, onward and upward. We're looking for the next thing. We want to get to the next glory, learn the new thing. But it's very important to remember back in what God has done, the walls He has torn down, the mountains He has moved, the things He has brought you through. And that goes for our loved ones. Like I think about my mother and how she should have been dead, according to the world and the prognoses and, just all accounts of outsiders looking in. She should have died many times over and over again, but because of somebody praying for me and bringing me into the family, I was able to guide her to the Lord, stand in the gap for her. And she doesn't always have the strength within herself to remember and to praise God and give Him glory. So I stand in the gap for my mom. We have loved ones in our lives that are very weak at times, but we are strong because we edify and we build each other up weekly. And we have to remember to cover them and thank God for them and remind God His promises. And sometimes that's all it takes too, is just a little walk down memory lane with that loved one. Remember when, Mom? Remember when it looked so bleak? Remember that pain, Mom? And I thank God, because she can't remember most of that. But I'll say to her, God got you through, Mom. You know, and I give him all the honor, all the glory, and all the praise, because she's got a lot of life left in her. And I just praise him, honor, glorify him, lift him on high. He's God all by himself, and I praise him. I praise his holy name, because holy is God Almighty.
During praise and worship, I got a mental picture of when God was very upset with the Israelites. And he told Moses, he says, I'll make a great nation out of you. And it's in 32, Exodus 32. And it said, wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, this is Moses, for mischief did he bring them out and slay them in the mountain, and to consume them from the face of the earth. Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and saidst unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of the heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give to your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do to his people. What a good, good Father.
I'm thankful for God. About a week and a half ago, he showed me something in the spirit. And this week, something transpired, and the enemy wanted me to retaliate. He wanted me to walk in anger. But God showed me, he said, I didn't show you that for you to walk in anger. I showed you that to walk in love, to continue to speak those things that are not as though they are, and to continue to pray for household salvation. So I thank God for household salvation. I thank God for working everything out for his good in Jesus' name. Good morning. So I stand right here in gratitude for our Heavenly Father, as Sister Shar and as Mother Ona, as they were speaking and they were sharing their testimonies about their lives being spared. It just, God just kind of started to show me kind of in like a flash. It was different times. I could have been gone. Different times when he put his hands on me. He had his hand on me and he was sparing my life and my children. And I'm just so grateful today. I am very, very, very grateful, and I will never forget what the Lord has done for me and my children.
Let me just say this. I'm not going to tell her story. She has to tell her own story. But this is a woman that could have been murdered, and she wasn't. Come on, thank the Lord for that.
When you said testify, it's like, okay, Gina, you can't sit down again. You got to get up. But God is good. When we were singing God,
He's a good, good Father. He is. He's faithful to all that He promises us. And sometimes we go through things in our lives and it seems like, okay, Lord, you said you were going to do this, but when? Lord, when? You know, sometimes it goes on a long time. It seems like it's never going to happen, but God never lies. And my testimony today has to do with about 11 years ago. We lost what we thought was our forever home. My husband and I, my children. They were a lot younger. And we went through a lot, you know. During that process, I almost lost my husband. Just a lot of things took place. But God, He made me a promise some years ago. He said that I would own houses and land. I got more than one prophecy about that. But when you're going through the process, it seems like it's never, ever going to happen. Sometimes it's that way. But again, I say to you, God is faithful. So I just want to move on, because I could just keep on going. But I want to move on to what has happened to us recently, my family. My husband and I, we had to move out of our apartment. And the thing that happened is that there was no going back. I had decided that, well, we'll wait, another year and try next year to get a house. But God is saying not so. I want to bless you now. But at the time, just see, we sometimes we get caught here. But anyway, what God has done for me and my family, though, we will be closing on our house in 30 days. What we lost was good, but God has multiplied what we lost. We have a 4-bedroom house with 4 bathrooms. My God! And it's at a price that we can pay. So when I say, when God promises you something, no matter how hard it is, no matter how long it takes, if we can stand and believe it, I'm with it. He will do it.
Whatever God promised you, if He promised you that husband, He's coming. Hey, I'm coming. I'll shout for you. If God promised you that wife, she's coming. That job is coming. That house is coming. That ministry is coming. That healing is yours and it will manifest is coming. Shout about it right now.
Good morning. I want to breakthroughs. There was being free from debt and getting new cars and different things like that. And I had testified about trying to get a new car. And the car that I had was the payments were upside down. And I had been to like 15 different dealerships, and nobody was like, no, we can't help you. And so I said, okay, Lord, that means it's on you, because I done done everything I could in the natural. A couple weeks ago, well, I should say 4 weeks ago, I started sensing in my spirit accidents. And I was already laying hands on my vehicle because it was on its last legs. When I say its last legs, I mean like it was dragging last legs. And every day I'm laying my hands on that vehicle and telling it to run in Jesus' name until we get better. And so about 4 weeks ago, I started sensing in my spirit an accident. So I started rebuking the devil, because I have teenagers, I have grandkids, I have a soon-to-be daughter-in-law that's pregnant. I'm like, Lord, no, so I'm rebuking the devil, coming against it in Jesus' name. What I didn't realize was that the Holy Spirit was getting me prepared
2.5 weeks ago, both my sons were in the car, and somebody T-boned them, hit them. They coming flying through a side street. They were a block away from my house, and hit them where the truck went up on 2 wheels. And literally, my oldest son said he felt the hand of God, the angels, to grab the truck and sit them back down. The airbags deployed, they were shooken up, they were really frightened, but they weren't hurt. The girls wasn't in there, my daughter-in-law wasn't in there, I wasn't in there, but God kept them. But God kept them. He covered them with the blood of Jesus. You know, what the enemy means for bad for you, God will turn it around for your good. One of my sons ran home, he was so frightened and shook up, and he was like, Mom, we just got into an accident. The whole time I'm just at peace, because it's like God just came over me. And they was like, looking at me like, you ain't upset. You ain't screaming and hollering like you normally do. I said, I don't know. I saw God. But he said, here's your new car, right here. So I'm like, Lord, thank you. When it hit me, I'm all in the street, just jumping around. I'm like, Lord, I didn't want to come like this, but so be it. Thank you, Jesus. So the insurance company went through all that because the young man took off. But we got a license plate and all that other stuff, and you know the things that go on. The insurance company called me a couple days ago on Friday, and they said, well, unfortunately your car is considered total, and so we're going to have to finish out the claim and come up with something and give you an estimate on how much your car is worth. I said, Lord, thank you. I don't know how much it's worth, but I know God gonna take care of it. I can pay that one off, get what I need, and some. So I just want to let you know, when you stand for God, when you stand in faith, and you know He gonna work it out, He will. Thank you, Jesus.
I thank God for the victory this morning. I recall my daughter telling me a few weeks ago, Mama, when somebody comes against you, just walk away and just say, thank you, Lord, and just pray for them. That happened to me this morning. And as I was sitting there, I was trying to get to church, and I really didn't have a ride. But I can always depend on my sister Leon and Apostle James. They always look out for me and other people in the church. So I said I was determined to make it here. I was rushing, and I said, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it, God, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it. And as I was sitting over there, I said, God, you did it before, and you do it again. And as I was sitting there, I heard the song. And the Lord told me I was a psalmist, because I sing all day long. Even on the phone to work, I'm singing, and clients are saying, we just enjoy her, just leave her alone. She just singing. I forget where I'm at. And I heard this song, and I know it's apropos for today. Always remember Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, ooh. Always remember Jesus, Jesus. Oh God, thank you. Woo! Glory, 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 glory. Always keep him on your mind. Woo! Hey, glory! Always keep him on your mind. No matter what you have gone through, you look at people, they look pretty, they dressed up, but you don't know what they have to go through on a daily basis. I thank God for my strength. I thank God for this church. I thank God for the anointing in this place. This is a powerful sanctuary where you can come and be healed and delivered and set free. I'm just so thankful
amazing. Good afternoon, church. I was back there in the song, and I was listening to the anointing and listening to the testimonies, and when Apostle said that God spoke to him and said that it's time for people to do their testimonies, I heard the Spirit tell me, what are you waiting on? And I was conflicted because I'm like, everybody has heard my story. He's like, you can't praise me enough for what I've done for you. So you get up there, and if you have to tell this story to help anybody that it's for, you get up there and you give me the praise. And I just want to thank him. Because like my sisters previously came up here and said, he could have took me out a long time ago. The devil wanted to take me when I was a baby, and it didn't happen. I have a purpose. Yes. I belong here. I belong here to help someone. So he tried again. He tried with drugs. He tried with alcohol. And God said, no, she belongs to me. You can't have her. She is mine. And I thank him so much because I love this life I'm living. I was living in darkness, degradation, and it was a light that came out of nowhere and grabbed me and said, come with me, daughter. You don't belong here. You belong with me. And I can't thank him enough because he didn't have to do it, but he did. He loved me just that much. When I couldn't love myself, he had praying warriors to pray for me when I couldn't pray for myself. He had my mom. He had my spiritual mother and father who was there when I couldn't be there. And they brought me through with the help of God. They are awesome. He is awesome. He's an awesome God. He's a healer, a deliverer, a promise keeper. Yes. All you gotta do is have the faith. Yes. Just the faith of a mustard seed. And he'll watch what he do. He'll show up and show out in your benefit. And he's done it. He showed up and he's still gonna show out. He said, I'm not done. Just wait. You keep on doing what I call you to do, and I'm gonna keep on blessing you. And I thank you. Amen.
Yes, I want to give it to them. It was hard for me to get, I know God will get up and start talking and open my mouth for more. And I'm just thankful. And I know God's going to use me. And I can't be walking in fear no more. I have to get up and talk. And I'm just thankful for God has been there for me. He has, I don't hold no anger. I don't hold no unforgiveness in my heart. I am in peace. I am going to love. I'm going to love you, and nothing you can do about it. I'm still going to love you no matter what. I'm still going to love you. And I just want God to just take me to that place. Learn to open your mouth up and talk because God's going to use you. He's going to use you in many, many ways. And so I just thank God. I love God. I love God. And I love the church. I think people always ask, why you always want to say it? Many churches do it. I know. It's the spirit, y'all. I am going to a place that I have never been before. I am moved. I tell you people, it's the spirit. That's what comes. And I said, why do people always so angry? Why do people always hurting other people? What is it, God? Because it's the spirit. It's not there. This church here, you're gonna move or move out. Something's gonna happen, and I know. I can see me moving. And this is what I want. I love you all. I do. I love y'all. I may sit here and be quiet. I'm just observing. I observe a lot. But because I don't want to walk in fear. And I know it's probably nothing but fear. And fear is not of God. it's the same no, God moved everything into, I said, God, here I am, use me. And I'm not afraid to help someone. It's too much going on out here. It's too much, you know, and I just want to make a difference somewhere. If I could just save my life, I feel in my family. I want you all to pray for my family. I would love my family to come here. Okay.
We thank you, God, that you're the same yesterday, today, and forever. And what you've done for us, you're not a God that has respect of person. What you've done for us, what you've done for her family, for her, you can do for her family. Now, God, you are the deliverer of all souls. And there's nothing too difficult for you to do. We believe now for your intervention. We believe now for your redemptive grace. We believe now, God, for your deliverance. Deliver them from their strongholds. Deliver them from their habits. Deliver them from their addiction. Deliver them from their pride. Deliver them from their sin. Deliver them from their environment. Deliver them, God, right now, from their past, from their culture, from generational curses. Draw. By your loving kindness, draw them. When you stand at the door of their heart and you're knocking, that they will come in right now and sup with you, and you with them. So, Father, we thank you for it right now. Save everyone. We plead the blood of Jesus over them now. Save everyone. Right now in Jesus' name. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. You know, when I was sitting here before Prophetess Mary got up and said that song, I was sitting there thinking about the same song. Because I had just preached, you know, on that Memorial Day about we need to remember. We need to remember, and I was still thinking about it, Lord, we need to remember Jesus. We need to remember all the things he's done, how he walked on water, multiplied the loaves and the fishes, all the miracles he did, how he raised people from the dead. We need to go back and read our gospel because he is good. He said there's none good but the Father. And when you see me, you see the Father. We need to remember Jesus. We need to start believing again. Maybe you say, God, help my unbelief. But you need to start believing that God is able to do above and above all we have to think. He's the same God today, yesterday, and forever. He's still Dr. Jesus. Somebody said he's still Dr. Jesus. He's still a great physician. He said, I am that I am. Whatever you need, God's got it. Whatever you want, God's got it. So we believe, God, that you are today, God. That you are a rewarder of them that diligently seek you. You are a rewarder, God. Hallelujah. You know, in Wednesday Bible study, we were finishing up that chapter 5 in Thessalonians, and it says that everything give thanks, but this is the will of God. I said, Lord, I don't know if I can give thanks for everything. But as we thought about it, Job worshiped. Oh, he said, though you slay me, yet will I worship. But I will put my trust in God. You know what fear is? False evidence appearing real. You got to get your eyes on Jesus and just full of the word. Because perfect love casts out all fear. Let love cast out the fear. Let Jesus cast out the fear. And when you take a step of faith like you did, sister, God said, as you take steps of faith, I'll walk with you every step. And you'll be transformed as you walk with me.
So one last testimony I really want to do with God. When the apostle said that God wanted us to testify of his goodness, I wasn't going to do it. And before I did, I had to show my wife what was going on because I didn't tell her what the Lord had done. And so I was just sitting on it. And so my cousin had a blessing. And after church, my wife and I went to her to pray the same blessing on herself. And then you had the pastor from Flint come up here and he said he had the blessing of, I think it was prosperity or financial something. And then last week, so I came up, my wife and I, then last week, you had us come to the altar again. And so I did. You know, we did. And so the other day, my son and I, we was going back and forth about the things of God. And his thing is, it has to be real. And my thing is, you don't have to feel a thing for it to be real. It can be by faith. And so the things we do is by faith, regardless of how we feel. And so my testimony is that the Lord canceled out my student loan. And said something has changed on your credit report. And I'm like, what? I don't do credit cards. I ain't did nothing. I ain't asked nobody for nothing. I'm trying to be debt free. I'm trying to get it together. I opened up that thing and it said, your credit score went up 100 points. I'm like, what? You say I'm not doing that? I looked over and it said, student loans closed. And open it back up. I close it out again, wait a couple of days, and open it back up. I close it out, and wait a few weeks. I said, I didn't even tell my wife. We close it back up. And it's still saying zero. My God. And that's because if you believe by faith, God will do that. Because what? I'm a tither and a giver. I tell the Lord, I'm faithful. And I don't understand. I'm almost at the breakthrough. But someone knock you back. But the devil is a liar. God is faithful. If you just hold on, keep doing the right thing. Pay your time. Give your offering. The pastor walked up through you and said, here you go. I said, okay. Hey.
Mama, to be down this song, please. Thank you. Hallelujah. Amen. Yeah, Mama should be for this one. Amen. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. I want you to put on the screen our affirmation when we give. Put that affirmation on the screen. Now listen, this is what you have to understand. Because you got to celebrate when others celebrate. Because what happens is that, what happens is that anointing there begins to flow on you. The pool was being stirred, they believed, by an angel. And the first person in the pool got the healing. Now that's the story. Amen. And the excuse of the man for 30-something years was, there's nobody able to put me in.
Yes.
And Jesus said, well, do you want to get healed? Because I come to stir you up. So see, the issue is not, well, that's his testimony. He stirred up about, I'm happy for him. Hold it down. You don't know the Bible. Because what God does for one, he can do for another. So if his pool is stirred, I'm jumping in that pool. Do you understand what I'm saying? And nobody asked y'all to do that, but you touch it. And I'm going to say right now, that's his money. That's his money. Because there's a connection. You have made tangible your faith. That what you've done for him, you can, well, you sure do a lot of sweating, bro. I ain't never seen him run. I ain't never seen him run. But he ran today. This is what the Lord told me. So that's yours. Because they're seeding into your testimony. So it can be their testimony. You got it? And what did he say? Because I don't want you to get all emotional and don't understand his testimony. He said, I'm a tither. He's a giver. When I say pledge, he and she, they're giving their pledges. Hallelujah. Did you hear what he said? Did he say 10,000? Did he say 20,000? He said 100. 100. So you giving into this, I'm telling you now, you don't need a prophecy. You're obeying God, and God said, because I saw your faith, I'm going to do it for you too. He said, do it for me too, Lord, do it for me too. But now you got to be obedient. When God tells you to give, you give. Hallelujah. Obey God. We're going to read that affirmation together. You stay right here. Everybody, go. As we give, stop right there. That's how the others will happen, what we're going to say. When we give our tithes and our offerings. The way we teach it, tithing is a maintenance plan. Giving your free will offering is a what kind of plan? Increase plan. The kingdom doesn't begin with you first. The kingdom begins with me first. Got it? The kingdom always goes away That's right, Jude. So the Bible says, give, then it will be given to you. With great measure, pushed down, shaken together, run it over. Did it run over? Did men give it to your bosom? Hallelujah. I said hallelujah. I'm declaring right now, your house mortgage is going to be wiped away. I'm declaring right now, the rest of your card note done in the name of Jesus. I'm talking to those tithers and offerers right now. I'm declaring right now, houses and land for you right now in Jesus' name. Hallelujah. We are the rich and famous. Hallelujah. Because we're a covenant child of God. All right, let's go. Let's go. I don't think I'm going to preach this morning. I got to say something though. Let's go. Amen. Job. I declare jobs over you. I declare better jobs. I'm looking for a better job. Hallelujah. Raises and bonuses. Come on. Benefits. Settlement. State. I'm commending you lying devil that's keeping back the Lord's blessing for his children as it relates to their inheritance. It's theirs. Say, my inheritance. Mine. I'm declaring now, inheritances are being released right now. They were hidden, but they're coming to light. Your blessing with your name on it, I declare it now in Jesus' name. Interest and income. I just go through I look for the right looking envelope. Personalized, it's handwritten. It's okay, there you go. Now here's the check for the church. I go to my mailbox and I look for the same thing. I look for your writing us letters with checks in the mail. Hallelujah! Somebody said checks in the mail. Some of your neighbors said checks in the mail. Yeah. Can I tell you something right now? Come on. If you stay before the presence of the Lord, God will show your face to somebody else. Is that a witness? That's how we got that church over there on Emerson Street. That's how some other things happen. They came to us and said, I was praying and the Lord showed me your face. This building belongs to you. When your boss is praying, your face coming to your boss. And they're going to come face to face to you. Amen. How does it happen? Can I give you the key? Can I give you the key? Can I give you the key? Stay before the face of God. And God will take your face and put it in the minds and hearts of others. If you think you're going to use the world's tactics to get what you want, you got another thing coming. Ain't nothing supernatural about that, and nothing supernatural going to happen.
Men will give it to your bosom. He said, give and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over. See, say measure, you measure, it's going to be measured back to you. He said, men will give it to your bosom. That means there ain't no money tree. What it is, and God begin to open the heart of a person, and they move with compassion, and God said, bless them. He'll even make their enemies bless you.
Yes. I'm going to get your money now. I'm going to get my tithes from that right now. I just be kidding. I'm not serious about things I say. But pay your tithes. Come on, y'all. Healing and divine health. Gifts and fine. Stop right there. Stop right there. Y'all know. Y'all already know. Y'all already know. I'm minding my own business. And the Lord says, go get that suit and put that suit on for this Sunday. I grabbed the suit, prepared the suit. All of a sudden, something feels a little chunky in the right pocket. I look in there and I found some $20 bills. Welcome. Anyone understand about finding money? Grab your Bible. You forgot you put that 50 in that Bible, and that Bible hit the floor. That 50 jumped out. Hello. Somebody say finding money. Yeah, hallelujah. 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 Say my steps are ordered of the Lord. You can jump out your car and all of a sudden a couple of 50s, a couple of 20s, a couple of 10s floating out. Amen. I know what I'm talking about. I've been there. And that wind just blows that right on to you. Can I get a witness out there? Come on, exercise your faith and find you some money. Or money finding you. Gifts and surprises. Finding money. Bills paid off. Never shout on that. Bills paid off. Bills paid off. Bills paid off. We ain't gonna suffer no more. We're not in poverty. We're not struggling. We're not under. We're above. We're not beneath. We're above. Hallelujah. We're debt free. Say I'm debt free. You got to be determined to be debt free. You got to be focused to be debt free. You got to be disciplined to be debt free. You got to be obedient to God to be debt free. Say I'm debt free. Yeah. We're doing something here today. Settlements. Debts demonic. Royalties receive. Scholarships and grants. How many in school? Going to school. Amen. Lift that hand up. We declare it now in Jesus' name. Say money coming to me right now. In the name of Jesus. You got to believe that. You got to keep saying that regularly. You got to keep saying that regularly. Amen. I said amen. Got to touch a governor, a president. Got to touch a boss. Got to touch somebody and they'll be writing something in. Amen. And that blessing is for you. It never existed before. But now it exists for you. You got to believe that. Hallelujah. Did we do contracts? Contracts. Money management. Everybody? 100. Give the Lord a shout and thank Him. All right, God bless you. All radical people sit on down. Good shot, y'all. You want to see some men and stuff? Where the men at? Stand. Where the men at? Go ahead.
This little also got her out of my house without her meditating very in. Because thou hast verbed to all of the beauty therein. For then thou shalt take thy way from, and that then thou shalt have good.
All right, you missed the point, but that's all right. We got you. We got you. Amen. That's all right. Come on, give a hand. Observe the new wall. Did you say that?
She said.
Did you say observe? Okay. You did? I love you, but you're willing to fight for it. Fight for what you know, girl. Yes.
This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night.
Now, why do you meditate day and night? To observe. Observe to do.
To observe to do according to what is written therein.
Right.
For then shall thy way be made prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success.
Very good. Yo, let's go. Let's go. Oh, amen.
The book of life, the book of what is up you shall meditate on day and night, and observe what is written in it, so we can prosper and be successful.
Come on, girl. I ain't hear no fear of that. I ain't hear no fear. You brought it on. Amen. Hallelujah. Betty, is that you back there? You standing? Miriam, weren't you standing?
This book of the law shall not depart from thy mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night.
Yes.
And do all accordingly therein, that they way may be prosperous, and that they shall you shall have good success.
Hallelujah. All right, so next time we're going to hear from Betty. We're going to hear from next week. We're going to hear from Betty. We're going to hear from Monique. We're going to and Corinne. I don't know why she didn't say anything. But she's always on. We're going to hear from. We're going to hear from Gina. Amen. Weren't you standing? Did you say something? You were standing.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Well, keep on standing. And then over here, we're going to hear from Dick. We're going to hear from Dick and Joanne over here. Amen. And our leaders up here, none of them said anything. And so we want to hear from you next week as well. We want our leaders to lead the way. Why are we doing this? I'll tell you why. Because man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. This book of the law, now for us, this book of the word of God, the law of Moses back then, the word of God now, shall not depart from my mouth. So I'm speaking the word, right? I'm meditating on it so I can speak it. But day and night, day and night, day and night. All right, you're declaring the word of God. Amen. And you got to observe, you got to study it so you can know it. In knowing it, what will it produce? Prosperity, good success. The word of God equals to prosperity and good success. Amen. It's not in the who's who. It's not dealing with Wall Street or having your savings account and doing the right financial management that you should. But your prosperity and success, according to Scripture, comes from Scripture, comes from the Word, comes from us being in the presence of the Lord. It's not a difficult equation. It's real simple. And we see it time and time and time and time and time again. Amen. 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 Now Now, one of our great legs is a training center. All right, so this is part of that, and we're not going to come short of it. All right, we can't be weak because you're weak. Okay? We can't drop the ball because you dropped the ball. Amen. We won't stay in the game. Y'all want to be in the game? You want to be on the team? All right, so we got a part to play on the team.
Right. Amen. Joshua 1:8. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth. Thou shalt meditate on it day and night, and to observe and to do all according to what is written within.
Okay. All right.
Then thy way shall be made prosperous.
Yes.
And good success.
All right, very good. Amen. All right, you all right? Okay. She walked 5 miles a day or whatever, and then she ran, and she slid into first base. That's the retirement. Hey, well, you know, when you're in the spirit, I'm praying everything's all right, but when in the spirit, you don't hurt yourself. Amen. Are you hurt? Are you feeling okay? All right. Okay. All right. Go for it. Okay, so this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. Because what are you doing?
Meditating on it day and night.
That is right.
And observe all that is in it.
Right.
And you shall prosper and have good success.
Very good. Amen. Well, it's offering to, oh no, we gave our offering. Corinne, you want to try it? All right. Go for it.
This book of the law.
Yeah, that's good. This book.
This book of the law will never depart from your mouth.
Yes.
Meditate. And you will meditate in it day and night. And then meditate in it day and night. And observe to do what is written in it. And then you will make your way prosperous. And then you will have good success.
Amen. And we have some others that's going to recite to us next week. All right. Very serious about this. The Word of God is what kept us. You're living in the Word. You're sitting in the Word of God. Amen. We prayed this. We fasted for this. We declared this. Amen. I said amen. Amen. We fought hard year after year after year for the liberty of the Spirit to operate here. Amen. Amen. So you're experiencing many years of trials and suffering and such like. And most of all, the studying of the Word of God. The older I get, I'm going to be even more rambunctious. I'm going to be even more driven. I'm going to be even more, amen, focused, even more determined, even more committed. Hallelujah. The older I get, amen, I'm not going to weak. I'm going to be like Moses. His eyes failed not. He still has strength at 120, although I'm not going to live 120. That's right, I said it. Amen, you heard me. Amen. Y'all can live 120. I ain't living 120. Amen. Y'all so quiet, I don't care. Amen. I'm going to live long, but I'm not living no 120. Everybody confessing 120. Well, you go ahead and live that long. Because when my time is up, I'm ready to get out of this joint. And be with God. Amen. People, I'm not going to talk about you because you want to live 120 years. But, no. See? Because our fight has been from inception. It's fighting every day, warring. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Amen. All right, when the Lord calls me, I'm ready to roll. Amen. Amen. Well, it's time for the word. Hallelujah. I said it's time for the word. we're going to be prepared for, I believe, our young people. Did I miss something?
First time visitors.
What?
First time visitors.
Thank you, Betty. I love you. In first time visitor, you can stand. And like, here for the first time, you want to share. All right, okay. You've done what the Lord required. Do you have your hand up? Yes, dear. Hi, your name? Savannah. Glad to have you invited. All right. So okay, she gave you inspiration to stand. Very good. Your name and who invited you?
Madison and Gloria.
Okay, all right. You don't have a church home? Do you have a church home, Madison? Well, you're more than welcome to keep coming. And receive, we trust you receive something already from the Lord and to encourage you along the way. God bless you. Ready for the word. This is Father's Day. Amen. And we have a little, I don't know if you saw that before, just a slide to wish you happy Father's Day. Fathers are important, and so I want to bring this message in about 10, 12 minutes. And we'll move right along. We allow the Lord to have his way. And all y'all preachers that are up there preaching at the mic. And aren't you glad that your leaders obey the Lord? And that you allow the Spirit to have his way. Thank God for the praise team. Thank you for John. Amen. You stay with us for a minute. This is Father's Day. We certainly want to honor fathers, and I want to do that with this message. But let's pray. Father, we ask your grace over this word. This word don't fall on deaf ears to the ground, but that it will reproduce after its kind now. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to talk about the voice of the Father or the voice of God. Voice is a sound or sounds made through the mouth, especially by people in speaking, singing, or shouting. Our focus today is the voice of God or the voice of the Father, and how throughout history and the history of man that God used his voice as an intimate method to relate to man. We'll discover how to hear his voice internally and externally, how to properly respond to his voice, the hindrances and benefits to hearing his voice. When we talk about voice, we inevitably must talk about sound. Sound is all around us. The whispering wind, the buzzing of an alarm clock, the voices of friends, the clatter of pans, the sound of music, and countless other sounds that compete for our attention. What is sound? The famous riddle asks whether sound is produced when the tree crashes to earth in a distant forest and no one hears it. This question is a riddle because there are two ways to define sound. One way is to define it as something that is heard. The tree makes no sound because no one hears it. The other way is to define sound as vibrations produced by a source. Voice of God produces a sound that should be heard and recognized. Let's go to John the Gospel, chapter 10. We're going to verses 14, 16, and 27. I am the good shepherd and know my sheep and am known of mine. Verse 16 says, and other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Verse 27 says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. You see the repetition that the Lord has given to us in Scripture, and it is sound, sound, sound of the voice, voice, voice. A sound that vibrates, quickens, bears witness to our spirit and our soul. 1 Kings 19 verses 11 and 12 And this is what it says. And he said, go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind and earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Verse 12 says, and after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire, and after the fire a still small voice. In Romans 8:16, the Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. In the New Testament, the Greek word for sound as used of the voice of God is phone, where we get the word phone or phonics and such. We have to be confident in the voice of God in us. The voice of God is so significant and important that God starts creation with his voice. Listen closely, even before light appeared on the scene. His voice appeared before light appeared on the scene. In Genesis 1, verses 1 to 3, and God said, verse 7, God said, verse 9, God said, verse 11, God said, 14, God said, verse 20, God said, verse 21, God said, verse 26, and verse 29, and verse 31, it says, and God saw that it was very good what he said. When we obey the voice of God, we will also see good. We sung the song, he's a good, good father. When we obey the voice of God, we will see good. Say it, when I obey the voice of God, I will see good.
I will see good.
Yeah, that's true. It is true. But here's the question. The question is, how does God sound? If he is voicing to me, and sound is important and relative to voice, synonymous to voice in many cases. When he speaks, how do I know he speaks? How does he sound? The answer, like you. He sounds like you. The voice is not a strange tone, a strange gender. He sounds like you. God's breath in you speaks from your spirit to your conscience, the way, the truth, and the life. He uses the vessel he has created and those vessels he has possessed. We see this in Genesis 2:7, and the Lord God formed man in dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. God is still breathing out his voice to those who spiritually can hear what his spirit is saying. God is still speaking through his created vessels. The voice of God is so significant and important that God, again, started his voice from the beginning, and he continues all throughout Genesis, all throughout the Old Testament, moving to the New Testament, to the dispensation of the Spirit of the church today, still voicing out. And he sounds, firstly, most intimately like you. He uses your voice. Is that not true? It is true. So God is not going to sound like a female to me, although God can use my wife's voice, or, I heard my mother say to me, I just heard it, it's not like he can't pull from other voices to bring a particular message, but as it relates to guidance, a way of truth, and a movement in your life, or the course God has given to you on a daily basis, he is using the spiritual vessel that you are, God in your vessel. God speaks through the vocal cords many times, and God speaks to your inner voice, your conscience. Here's another question. Why can't I hear the voice of God? The answers may be numerous, but one significant one is that flesh is in the way. Carnality is in the way. I'm in the way. And so Scripture says to deny ourselves, take up the cross and follow Jesus. At the cross, there's where I first saw the light, as the song goes. The cross humbles us, directs our focus from us to God. It quiets the flesh, surrenders our will to God. Now we are able to listen to God's voice. Without this remedy, we will presume on God to do or say things He has never directed us to do. The scripture says to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding or your own presumptions. In all your ways you acknowledge Him, and He then will direct your path. How am I going to have the path for school and for friends and for purchases and benevolences and for marriage and concerning my children when I begin to consult with the Lord? He begins to give me answers. So again, if you're not looking for His voice, you won't find His voice. That's basically what I'm saying. Seek and you shall find Him. Do I have some seekers out there today? Another answer to why we can't hear the voice of God, the voice of the Father, we don't have faith. Faith means trust, persuasion, confidence. Romans 10:17 says, faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God. Also in Romans it states that God has given to every man the measure of faith. So use your faith and believe, trust, be confident that your Father desires to speak and to communicate with you. God voices His way, will, and purpose for our life in different ways. His voice can be heard in 7 ways. Now, it could be others, but these are the 7 I'm going to tap into real quickly. The first is from the Bible. Say that with me. God speaks from the Bible. All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the man of God, woman of God, the people of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. That's 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. We also see what scriptures do you know, is really what I'm going to say, excuse me. So I'm reading my notes here. What scriptures do you know so that God can speak to you? All right? So if God is using the Bible, using scripture, using His word, the word of God, then what scriptures do you know so that He can recite that scripture? The Holy Spirit brings all things to your remembrance so that you can have that word when you need it on point. Amen. The scripture says that when they were in the upper room, close to 120, the wind came, the fire came, and what happened is that Peter came up and he began to say, this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And that's Joel 2:28. Now, how did he know that scripture if he never studied that scripture? Amen, somebody. All right, so you can't voice anything without knowing anything. Secondly, it is through our experiences. Circumstances or our experiences has something to do with hearing the voice of God. During the time of Prophet Malachi, many of God's people, listen to this closely, were experiencing economic disaster. Pests were devouring their crops and their investment were failing. These severe conditions were a message from God to the people. They had been neglecting their obligation to tithe. So God withdrew His protection from the economic devourers. And sometimes a trial may come on us because of our sin or neglect of something important to God. So this is just one example of this matter of how God voices through experiences. And that's in the negative. There's also the positive side, as you well know. What worldwide event can we say God is speaking to His people today concerning? Yeah. Don't forget this. Don't forget this. That God voices to His prophets. God voices through those who are His obedient vessels. They begin to speak, begin to declare, begin to warn, begin to caution. All right? If the people don't hear it, government don't hear it, people don't hear it. Now here it comes. He says now through these people, listen. If they don't listen, if the nation doesn't listen, He comes in several ways. He'll come through the enemy of that nation, and the enemy of that nation will begin to infiltrate will begin to destroy that nation that should have been obeying God by hearing his voice. He could do it through pestilence. He could do it through social economic situations, financially. It is God speaking. And this is what we have to understand. He uses experiences. And then through common events, Jeremiah observed a potter at work, and he heard God say to him that just as the potter can shape the clay in any way he chooses, so God could do whatever he pleased with the nation of Israel. Somebody say amen. Amen. I don't know, sometimes you might see a leaf fall from the tree or a pothole or whatever, and you get a message, God speaks to you. Can I get somebody to say amen? Amen. So I don't look foolish up here talking. God will give you an illustrative sermon through nature, through things. Amen. Amen. And also by internal or the audible voice of God. But we move now to angels. And angels is another way that God speaks. Angels are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. Hebrews 1:14. And since angels are the servants of Christians, it shouldn't surprise us that from time to time, God would allow us to see them or sense them in a profound supernatural fashion. In the early church, angels were famous for engineering jailbreaks. Acts 5:19 and Acts 12:7. Philip was directed by an angel. Cornelius, the first Gentile convert, was visited by an angel. Angels show up in this camp often. I sense it. When I do, I speak it so that I can let God know and the angels know I know they're here. So that with that acknowledgement, they can begin to work and serve as ministering spirits among the saints. Amen, people. So God gives us that spiritual discernment to sense that. We had a gentleman that, he was sitting on the organ when we were at the YMCA, our first true place of public ministry. And the Spirit of God was just flowing. He fell off the bench. Bang, hit the floor. And so later he says, I felt a wind, and then I felt feathers go across my face, and it knocked me out. Now this is a street boy, so he ain't, all hyper in spiritual things and the religious order of church life. I saved him from the streets. The Lord showed me in much depression and dismay. Years ago, I said, God, I need help, show me my angel. Show me the angel of this ministry. I know who the angel is. I know his name. All right, I won't go any further because you might think I'm spooky, but I do. And so I went to sleep. When I went to sleep, let me hurry up here, I was fighting demons, unseen forces, and it was like in an office place, many cubicles, whatever. I don't know why I was there. I was fighting it, and then I backed up, fell out of the two-story window of the building, hit the ground. When I hit the ground, I was in the street, and all I could see was just the silhouettes of buildings, because that's how dark it was, and the street light was on me. And so when I turned to the right, here comes this man out of the dark. He had a barrel chest, black suit, black tie, white shirt, stood about 8-9 feet. He came over, grabbed me, and lifted me up. I woke up immediately. And God says, that's your angel in ministry. He will help you. I think that was quite encouraging. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We have guardian angels who, we've heard it, somebody testified about that, right? Okay, Tina did, how the angels just protect and serve. The voice of the Father by impressions. Frequently the Holy Spirit speaks through impressions. He influences our feelings, our physical senses, and our mind. Yes, he does. And it's not so much verbiage, vowels, syllables, and consonants, but it is more an impression, almost like a red flag, red light, stop, no, don't do that, don't make that decision, don't go there, or a green light to do something, or a caution, a danger. Somebody mentioned that also, I think Tina. I've heard that in the spirit and sensed that and began to pray against that. Anybody ever gone through that before? Many of us, right? You have a dream or something, or all of a sudden this fear comes on you. You don't know where it comes from. You ask the Lord, and God voices the Father in you. You need to pray in the spirit now, or pray for this person now. And you didn't have that person on your mind, but all of a sudden God interrupts your routine and begins to impress upon you, and you begin to pray in the spirit. Impressions. He voices through visions and dreams. Do you know that the inventor of the modern sewing machine, Elias Hall, created his invention to a dream? Or that Niels Bohr, the Nobel Prize winner, claimed he has seen the structure of the atom in a dream. God speaks through dreams and visions. Consider the biblical background for believing in and trusting in dreams and visions. You can go to Genesis 23, Numbers 12:6, 1 Kings 3:5, Daniel 7:2. Those of you who know shorthand. Matthew 2:13 and 14. Visions, 2 Kings 6:17. Can't go there. Isaiah 6:1. Can we get Isaiah 6:1 there? Acts 7:55 and 56. Dreams and visions are from the Lord. It is God the Father voicing to us. So, as we go to Isaiah 6:1, I will conclude. Let me conclude then by saying that we must learn to live by the daily bread, or in other words, the daily voice of God. Let's keep it on the screen. Learn to position ourselves daily at the feet of Jesus to hear the voice of God every day, every day, every day. Give us this day our daily bread. I'm listening for his voice. I'm ready to see his voice using all of these angles and positions that I mentioned to you earlier to give me my daily bread. So the prophet Isaiah says, in the year that my cousin King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord. And where was he as he saw this vision? He was sitting on the throne, high lifted up. His train, the glory train, like the train of a bride's gown, dress. His train filled the temple. Verse 2 says, above it stood the seraphims, each one 6 wings, twain, covered the face, twain, the feet, twain. Did they fly? In position. All right, let's read on. And one cried to the other, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. We'll stop there. Visions, and dreams. So I wanted to give you this message on the Father's voice today. How important it is that we obey the Lord. The Father spoke to us. Let us stand. The Father spoke to us, and he said, I want to hear my people speak of me. I want to hear my people testify of my glory, of my power, of my goodness. Amen, saints. And because of that, did he not bear witness to what we were doing? And the creme de la creme, testimony. I know sometimes we struggle with, at least I do as a private person, how much should I share, or should I share it all? Can I get a couple of witnesses here? Right. Private people, right? I don't know why you raised your hand, but anyway. But when we do share, you see, glory of how God moves and how he blesses us. Amen. We're here to celebrate fathers, and we're going to thank our Father here today. And then we have some gifts we're going to share with some of our fathers already left, but for those who are here and those who are watching, we're going to sign off to you. But before we do, I want you to bless your father, whether surrogate, spiritual, biological father. I want you to bless them and let them know how much you love them and thank God for them. Fathers are not perfect, all right, but they are still dads, still the same. Whether your dad was with you or not, and mine, for whatever struggles he had, amen, was when I was 11, he left, and so I had to be a surrogate dad to my siblings and so on and so forth. And that took away from me all the wonderful experiences one could have with a dad. But the Heavenly Father came in. So let the Heavenly Father come into your life and let Him enrich and restore your life and let Him benefit you like no earthly father can. And so if you today don't know Jesus, and those of you who are here, in the pardon of your sin, you don't know Jesus as a lover. You don't know Him as a friend. You don't know Him as a comforter. This is a wonderful opportunity to accept Him as Savior and Lord. Let's bow our heads. Father God, we thank you today in Jesus' name for this word. As this word will not return void, accomplish what it please, prosper the thing whereto you sent it. And Lord God, forgive us for our sins. Forgive us, Lord God, for our shortcomings. Forgive us, Lord God, for our pride. Forgive us for our unforgiveness. All that sin is. We give it to you today because you're the great sin remitter. Remit our sins from us today. Say with me, forgive me, Father, as I accept Jesus as my Savior and Lord. Come into my life in a greater way. Renew my life. Restore my soul. I promise to serve you all the days of my life. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Just a few more minutes, you can be seated. Thank you for those of you who are watching on YouTube. God bless you.